Hi, this is Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular Washington Policy Center update on issues and projects that we're working on, and also a look ahead at what we see coming next. So first off, on the issues we're working on, news just broke this week that the governor has completed secret negotiations with government unions and has given out, not surprisingly, the largest pay raise in union history. The union, AFSCME, which represents 47,000 state workers, is over the moon delighted with this agreement. Jason Mercier on our staff tracked the negotiations as much as anyone in the public possibly can, and the reason is because they're secret. This was entirely behind closed doors. We have no idea what the governor's office offered, what the unions offered, what was negotiated. The only thing that the public finds out is that the final agreement has been reached. It's just announced from on high, and yet it involves billions of dollars of public money that we now know will be woven into the next 2-year contract for state workers, and that will be presented to the legislature in January for funding. And you can imagine what the political argument is going to be. Lawmakers will be on the spot, and the governor will simply say, this is a done deal. Now you have to provide the funding for it. Workers will receive a 7% pay raise over 2 years. This is at a time of recession for most taxpayers in the state. Most other workers are seeing their income being eroded by inflation. And instead, the governor has given out this very generous pay raise, which will be funded by the public treasury. A few other items that are in it is workers will get a $1,000 payment for getting the COVID shot, even if they have some objections to that, but there's an automatic reward put in there. There's also a very nice feature that any of us would like to have, and that is a $1,000 bonus for staying employed. So if a state employee worked from mid-2022 to mid-2023, 1 calendar year, you automatically get a $1,000 bonus. And then another item that, again, the advantage of having Jason, who read the entire agreement, and on page 176, he found a little nugget, and that was a commitment by the governor's office that all future negotiations with the union or any changes to this contract would be negotiated in secret. So this is a complete lack of transparency about how this major government program is being run and how the governor's making decisions on how to spend public money. We think that that should be done transparently, that these should be part of the Public Meetings Act, and that there should be openness, just like there is in any other government program where there's public comment or hearing or lawmakers are involved. Before 2002, we had that system where compensation and salaries, benefits for public workers was included in the budget process that was considered by the legislature. The Democrats enacted collective bargaining that year, and since then, this has been privately negotiated with the unions. Also, as you can imagine, the timing is interesting because the governor announced this agreement with the union just weeks before the next election, and the union, AFSCME, is a major donor to Democrats and a major supporter of Governor Inslee himself. So this appears to be a linkage between getting the union contract, very generously funded, big increase, and then in the next 5 or 6 weeks we go into a major election, and so we see that the timing is significant there. We'll continue to follow this, and we will be doing an analysis of this proposal when it finally does go to the legislature in January to inform lawmakers about how this came about. Next is something we've been following very closely, the income tax court case. We have been very involved in this. Our research is a major source of footnotes and sources that are provided to the courts. A trial judge struck down the tax already. It's on its way to the Supreme Court. The next thing we're looking for is timing. The state Supreme Court says that it will take the case for review. We, of course, are hoping that they will uphold the trial court and find that the income tax was unconstitutional. We think that case is obvious based on the facts, but you never know what the state Supreme Court is going to do. The court's clerk has told us that no hearing has been scheduled yet, so we don't know when that's going to happen. We expect that at the end of October, a date will be announced, and that the hearing itself will take place in January or February, and then a decision will come months after that. The reason this is important is because on another track, we have learned that the Department of Revenue is already implementing rules for collecting the tax. So the income tax is due in April of next year. And as I just described, the court case isn't going to be finished by then. We won't have an answer from the Supreme Court about whether this tax is even legal or not. And yet the executive branch is moving forward with enforcement. So we've raised questions with them about that. We have participated in public comment. Department of Revenue held a public hearing. The public came and presented a lot of problems about this. The first person to ask a question was Jason of our staff about the timing as to why they are planning to enforce what is probably going to be found to be an illegal tax. The department said, we need to be ready. We're going to go ahead and do it anyway. So we'll see how that comes out. A piece of good news that we came across here earlier in September was the governor finally, after almost 2.5 years, announced that he was voluntarily giving up his emergency powers that he invoked in March of 2020, and that would happen on October 31st. So he announced that in mid-September. So to us, this doesn't fit the definition of what a public emergency is. Public emergencies are not scheduled to start at certain times and then end at other times. And yet the governor announced 6 weeks in advance that the emergency would end on October 31st. The good news for Washington Policy Center and for the people of the state is that the governor is finally giving up this sole power, and he's returning to normal democracy, bringing in the people's elected representatives in governing the state. We think that's a good step. He has also pulled back many of his emergency orders that he put in place. Good. Nobody wants to be governed by emergency order. We all know what that looks like. Washington Policy Center is the only organization in the state that stayed on this consistently, day after day, week after week, for months. We put a day counter on our website that shows the number of days the governor has been working under emergency powers. By the time October 31st comes, that will be 973 days, which breaks a record in state history and is one of the longest periods in the country when a governor exercised this authority. Our recommendation to the legislature that we will be pushing very hard, and it's bipartisan as well, members of both parties are worried about this abuse of power, is to put in place a 60-day or a 30-day limit on the governor's powers going forward. If an emergency really happens, the governor declares it, but after 30 days, the legislature would be able to review that power. If it's not approved, it automatically expires. We are one of only 4 states that does not have that automatic shut off and a return to normal democracy, and we hope we can get that going forward. Next issue is the governor issued a rule on vaccine mandates for state workers. He is keeping that in place. We think that the science and common sense shows that this isn't necessary. Elizabeth Hovde on our staff has been following this very closely. She, again, is virtually the only person in the state who's been reporting statewide that the governor is moving ahead with this mandate. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of state workers who have lost their jobs because of this rule. Medically, it doesn't seem to be necessary. The vaccine does not stop the spread of COVID. Many people have had it and now have a certain level of immunity. And yet the governor has made this blanket statement that any public worker who does not get vaccinated or boosted up to whatever schedule he's at will be fired. And we already know that over 400 members of the Department of Transportation has been fired because of this, but it's also impacting people in law enforcement, social service agencies across the board. And that the governor says that there's a shortage of essential workers, emergency workers, medical workers, nurses. And so to us, it doesn't make sense that he imposes this mandate on the one hand, and then says, and refuses to grant religious exemptions or accommodation. And then on the other hand, says there's a shortage of essential workers. Common sense would say that you would want to encourage more skilled people to go into public service. And then lastly, I'll touch on some fun events that we've had. Top was our Spokane dinner, which we held on September 16th. It was well attended, very successful. We had Tulsi Gabbard as a speaker and Victor Davis Hanson, both of whom were tremendous. Tulsi Gabbard was interesting as a Democrat, former Congresswoman from Hawaii. She gave a fresh perspective on what's happening to our country. I think the quote that caught everybody's attention is she said, "The moral rot and corrosion in our country needs to be fixed." And that's exactly why we invited her to provide a fresh perspective. Folks on the left are getting more constricted regarding speech. They're engaging in cancel culture and censorship. And for years, Washington Policy Center has made it clear that we are interested in a wide variety of views. Tulsi Gabbard provided exactly that, fresh perspective, and our audience really enjoyed hearing from her. And then Victor David Hanson gave a great update about where our country is now, particularly in terms of historical perspective and what he sees going forward for the next election and then moving into the presidential cycle in the next 2 years. So it was a really good event, and we were excited to. There were no COVID restrictions, no masks, none of that at our event. And everyone really had a good time. It was a great gathering. Next, we're looking forward to our next main dinner, which will be in Bellevue on October 14th. The dinner is sold out, but there are still tickets available in the young professionals section of that dinner that we have. And we also have a waiting list. So if anyone is interested in attending and you haven't gotten a ticket yet, contact Kaylee on our staff through our main office, and she will see about putting you on a waiting list or arranging for a way for you to attend. It should really be a lot of fun. And with that, I'll wrap up. And as always, say thanks for your support to all of our members and supporters across the state. Your donations to us make our work possible. Our research staff has been active all through the summer and fall going into the election cycle, issuing research and commentary that's relevant to the debate that's going on now. And then, of course, looking forward to the next legislative session. So again, thanks for your support. And I'll be back with another update in the future. Thank you.